The Zarath believed Origin Terra had grown soft, that it had forgotten how to bleed and burn. But what they didn't realize was that monsters don't forget, they just wait. And when Terra's patience ends, so does the galaxy's mercy. No one really remembered why the bombs fell. Some blamed resources. Others said it was a show of power. But deep down, every human scattered across the systems clinging to the edges of breathable planets knew the truth. The Zarath never saw humanity as equals. It started with whispers, a lost signal from the Varelian mining colony, then radio silence from Titan's oceanside outpost. By the time Origin Terra's scanners lit up with spikes of radiation, it was already too late. 12 colonies, 12 craters, over 1 billion lives wiped out in a matter of hours. And Origin Terra. Origin Terra was next, but that's where they messed up. See, the colonies had scientists, engineers, diplomats, civilians, good people. Origin Terra, though. Origin Terra had monsters, not the kind that stalked in shadows or snarled with fangs. No, these were monsters we made, woke up, trained, enhanced. The kind of beings you locked away in underground bunkers because they were just too much even for their own kind. People who once fought in wars so violent, the galaxy passed laws to erase their memory. The sleeping giants. They lived in the dark corners of Origin Terra. Cryo coffins lined like tombstones. Neural interfaces that still sparked with data from 100 battles. Ghosts with names like Wraith Naira, Vox Rook, and Godhand. And now someone had given Origin Terra a reason to wake them. Major Kalen Virex's eyes snapped open in the pitch-black vault under Icelandic soil. He didn't breathe at first, just blinked, registering the change in atmosphere. Warm air recycling lights humming above him. That meant someone had tripped Protocol Sigma-9. The Doomsday Wake-Up. His voice came out hoarse, soaked in cryo damage. "Who authorized this, Colonies?" A voice crackled through the intercom. "They bombed our people, Virex, all 12. He sat up slowly, bone-cracked muscle groaned, but the fire in his chest, that was fresh. It burned like it always did before a war. Only this time, there were no politics, no orders to hold back, no civilians in the way, only revenge. How many of us are up? 17 out of 36 viable. Virex wiped the frost from his face and muttered, "17's enough." By the time he stood, systems came alive around him. Armor boots unlocked, gravity gloves shimmered on the shelf. The entire vault pulsed with angry red light. Other chambers hissed open. One by one, giants stepped out. Veterans of old wars, legends with cybernetic limbs and dead stares, people history tried to forget. Naira Vox walked by without a word, hair tied in a tight braid, nanospikes already forming at her fingertips. She didn't ask questions. She never did. She just killed. Rook rolled his neck. Guess peace was too damn quiet. Virex looked up at the hollow screen flickering above them. It showed the colony maps, each one blinking red, lifeless. In the center, Earth blinked yellow, marked as final target. "We're not waiting for them to make the first move," he said. "You think they're ready?" Naira asked, cocking an eyebrow. "No," Virex said with a grim smile. "I think they forgot who we are." Meanwhile, in the Zarath Council ship, orbiting Jupiter, Commander Suresh watched Origin Terra's response through a tactical display. He looked amused. "They awakened their beasts," he muttered, amused. "How predictable, how human." Another officer approached. "Shall we engage preemptively?" Commander Suresh chuckled, clicking his claws together. "No, let them come, let them scream, we will make it quick." But far below, in the steel veins of Origin, Terra's ancient war bunkers, something primal had begun to stir. Not machines, not tech, but fury. The kind born when you kill a child, and the father lives to find you. They thought the colonies were Origin Terra's strength. But Origin Terra's real strength was in the nightmares it never dared unleash. Until now. The old dropship rattled like a dying beast as it shot through the thermosphere, flames licking its hull. Inside, the silence was thick, not from fear, not from hesitation, but from the grim understanding shared by killers who've seen too many battlefields and survived them all. Kalen Virex sat at the front, his helmet in his lap, eyes scanning the mission display. A map of the Zarath's forward base on Ganymede glowed red. First target, first message, not to win. Not yet. Just to hurt them back. He looked up, caught Widow's eyes across the bay. No words exchanged, just a nod. They all knew what this was: retaliation, and the first of many. Behind them, Rook was already jacking stem shots into his neck, his muscles twitching under reinforced armor. "Feels like the old days," he muttered, grinning with a mouthful of metal. "Yeah," said Astra Keel, a former orbital assassin with optic implants glowing pale blue. "Back when we were allowed to get dirty." "Now," Virex said, voice cold. "There are no rules, no oversight. We go loud, we go hard, and we don't stop." Outside, Ganymede loomed closer, its icy plains gleaming like a corpse under moonlight. Satellite readings showed the Zaroth had set up a planetary relay base there, shielded, staffed, armed to the teeth. Perfect. As they breached atmosphere, auto turrets lit up the sky, but the dropship dove low, weaving like a bird of prey. Anti-air fire screamed past them, but Rook was already laughing. "They're trying to shoot us down. Adorable focus." Virex snapped, slamming his helmet on. "We hit the relay core, first kill comms, then we clean house." The ship slammed into the ice doors, blasting open as smoke flooded in. Within seconds, the team was out. 7 giants moving like shadows over the battlefield, swift and silent and merciless. Naira Vox was first to strike her nanospike, slicing through 2 Zaroth sentries before they could scream. Astra Keel ghosted up the tower, her blade humming, as she slit a commander's throat with surgical grace. Virex and Rook pushed through the central corridor, bullets flying armor, soaking impact after impact. Zaroth soldiers fired back, screaming in their native tongue, but they weren't prepared for human monsters, especially not these ones. Virex hurled a pulse grenade through a breach in the wall. It went off with a shattering bang, one that echoed deep into the ice caves. As the base lights flickered, he stormed the core, tore open the access panel, and shoved in the virus spike. A burst of data corruption surged through the Zaroth systems. "No more calls for help," he muttered. Behind him, screams cut through the comms, then silence. One by one, the squad checked in. No injuries, no losses, just carnage. As the last Zaroth gurgled and collapsed at Widow's feet, she knelt and wiped her blade on its robe. That all they had. Virex looked around at the burning wreck of the once imposing base. Nah, this was just the front porch. They didn't wait for backup, didn't waste time with trophies. They uploaded the footage bodies, fire destruction directly into the Zaroth datanet, a message written in blood. Origin Terra was awake. Back in the Zaroth's fleet, Command Commander Suresh stared at the footage streaming into his hollow screen. He watched as the humans tore through their forces like they were nothing. Watched as fire consumed their base, and Virex looked directly into the camera before spitting the words, "You started this. We'll end it." Suresh's jaw clenched. Commander said, one of his aides' voice trembling. They broadcasted this to all sectors, even the Council." "Shut it down," Suresh growled. But it was too late. Human vengeance had gone viral across the stars others watched. Aliens, governments, old allies, former enemies. And for the first time in centuries, fear returned to their eyes. Not because humans were strong, but because they were angry, and anger made them unstoppable. They didn't stop. Within 240 Stardrift cycles, 3 more Zaroth outposts were reduced to rubble. No survivors, no mercy, and no doubt left in anyone's mind. Origin Terra was done playing the victim. The strike teams moved like shadows across the void, coordinated, precise, fueled by rage, centuries in the making. The old war machines from Origin Terra's classified bunkers were finally moving again. What the galaxy called terror squads, humans now called justice units. But this wasn't just about revenge. No, Virex had a bigger plan. Back on Origin Terra, deep beneath the Titan Veil, complex mountains, in a fortress so secret it didn't exist on any known star map, Virex stood in front of a hollow table with 2 of the deadliest humans ever engineered. Naira Vox, still soaked in blood from their last raid, leaned against the wall. Her eyes, cold and sharp, never left the table. Rook, shirtless despite the sub-zero temperature, paced like a caged beast. "We've hurt them," Virex said, tapping a blinking light over the Orion sector. "But now, we make them bleed." The display zoomed in to reveal a planet nest hollow, what the Zaroth called Sovereign Cradle, a breeding world, millions of eggs, billions of unborn. It wasn't just a target, it was a statement. Rook frowned. "You want to go after their kids?" Virex looked him dead in the eye. "I want them to feel what we felt. I want them to know what loss means. Let them beg for peace." Even Widow raised an eyebrow. "That's a line we've never crossed." He didn't flinch. Neither had they until they wiped out every child on Varelian. Silence fell. No arguments. Just the low hum of hatred in the air. Outside, the launch bay roared to life. Orbital carriers loaded with firebombs, sonic imploders, and tactical nukes prepped for deployment. Origin Terra was about to commit the one act no one believed it capable of: genocide. Meanwhile, in the Zaroth capital city, on Zaroth Prime, chaos bloomed. What once was a council of cold logic and dominance now descended into fear-driven shouting. "This is not retaliation," barked a counselor. "This is extermination." "They are humans," spat another. They were supposed to be fractured, passive-divided. Commander Suresh stood before them, silent, watching the feed from the latest attack. Nest Hollow's airspace had already been breached. Origin Terra's fleet was on its way. The Zaroth military scrambled to intercept, but they were too slow too late. Suresh's clawed hand clenched behind his back. He knew this wasn't just about a few colonies anymore. This was a war of memory. They thought humans would break. Instead, they'd awaken the part of humanity buried for generations, the part that never forgives. Commander, one of his aides, whispered, barely audible, "Should we consider negotiating?" He didn't answer. There was no negotiating with fire. In orbit above Nest Hollow Origin, Terra's fleet dropped into position like falling daggers over a dozen dreadnoughts, hundreds of smaller crafts, and the Onyx Vow, the largest warship Origin Terra had ever built. A ship so feared it was decommissioned to prevent war crimes. Virex stood on its bridge staring down at the planet below. He didn't blink, didn't breathe deep. This wasn't a decision, it was a consequence. "Give the order," Astrakeel said beside him, fingers ready over the command console. He looked at her, then at Widow, then at the stars. Fire. What came next was not a battle, it was a reckoning. Tides of white-hot energy rained from orbit-splitting continents. The skies of Nest Hollow turned to ash. The screams of billions never made it to space. The human fleet watched in silence, no celebration, no victory chants, only vengeance. And across the galaxy, species who once mocked Origin Terra now locked their doors. Traitors diverted routes. Ancient enemies reconsidered their grudges because they realized something terrifying. Humanity hadn't gone mad. They'd gone rational about revenge. And when humans start thinking while angry, that's when the stars burn. The galactic net was on fire. News of Nest Hollow's destruction had spread across every known system like a virus. Pirate forums, diplomat, channels, black market relays, every frequency pulsed with the same message. Origin Terra doesn't forgive, Origin Terra doesn't forget. On Zaroth Prime, the Zaroth homeworld silence fell like a funeral shroud. Their breeding world, sacred, untouchable, was gone. Not conquered, not occupied, erased. Over 1 billion eggs turned to molten slag, entire lineages extinguished before birth. And Origin Terra hadn't even broken a sweat. Commander Suresh stood alone in the Hall of Ancients, watching the burn-marked surface of Nest Hollow spin slowly on a projected globe. The council had collapsed after the strike. Half were dead victims of their own people's rage. The other half had fled, hoping to escape what they now saw coming. Extinction. Behind him, an aide hesitated before speaking. What now? Commander Suresh didn't turn. Now we ask ourselves the one question we've never considered. What's that? He turned, eyes glowing with a mixture of hate and fear. What if humans were never the prey? Back on Origin Terra, the skies glowed with faint streaks of re-entry as the Onyx Vow and her sister ships returned home. But they weren't met with parades, no fireworks, no applause. The people of Origin Terra stood in silence as the war giants touched down because they knew what had just been done, and what it meant. Virex walked through the landing corridor with Widow beside him. They said nothing. There was nothing left to say, not after a genocide. Some people cheered, others cried, but most just watched. Because even on Origin Terra, people feared them now. In the war room beneath the Titan Vale complex facility, the briefing lights dimmed. A dozen other nations had finally responded, not with resistance, but with caution. Suddenly, Origin Terra's political lines blurred. Flags didn't matter anymore. Borders meant nothing. The old powers had stepped back, letting the giants lead. Humanity had tasted revenge and found it addictive. Virex stood before the Global Defense Council, whose members appeared via holoscreens, their faces pinched and pale. "You've made your point," said the Indian representative voice cold. "You've shown the galaxy who we are." No, Virex said flat. "We've shown them what happens when you murder our children." "And what are you now?" the British delegate asked quietly. "Avengers or butchers?" Virex looked straight into the lens. "Both." He turned the holomap, showing a new target sector, Ecliptus. Not Xaroth territory, not anymore. That sector belonged to a species called the Mirren, a reptilian race known for weapons trafficking. The same ones who had sold plasma bombs to the Xaroth fleet. "They funded the colony bombings," Virex said. "They sold death and watched from the shadows. That ends now." Widow leaned in. "We torch their vaults, their fleets. We make them remember who they sold to." The council protested, voices overlapping in a tangle of panic and outrage, but no one tried to stop them. No one could, because Origin Terra's monsters had full control now. Out in the Ecliptus sector, the Mirren fleet received word of the incoming human strike. They laughed. "We are not the Xaroth," their warlord hissed to his generals. "We were born in fire. They cannot intimidate us." But humans weren't coming to intimidate. They came to eliminate. Just 2 ships arrived. Not a fleet, not an army. Just the Onyx Vow and the Veil Reaper, an old stealth cruiser that hadn't been seen since the Red Wars. The Mirren launched their defenses early. Dozens of frigates and plasma netters. But before their ships could reach the human crafts, they were already burning. Astra Keel, piloting the Veil Reaper, moved like she was dancing through time. Every shot she fired found a weak spot. Every ship that tried to escape was vaporized before the AI targeting systems could even lock on. On board the Onyx Vow, Virex stood on the deck watching the Mirren fleet scatter like insects. "Cowards." Rook muttered from the weapons station. "They barked louder than they bite." No, Virex said. "They just never expected the leash to break. The human ships didn't leave survivors. No warning shots, no prisoners. Only one message was transmitted after the final Mirren base exploded. Origin Terra doesn't do second chances. Elsewhere in the galaxy, old enemies watched from behind reinforced shields. The Drixari Confederacy began evacuating embassies on human-aligned planets. The Ashari Syndicate doubled the price on human contracts, then canceled them altogether. Even neutral systems began scrambling defenses. No one dared contact Origin Terra because now they weren't sure what Origin Terra wanted. And deep beneath the surface of Virelion, a place long thought dead began to pulse with power again. An old AI buried during the last galactic purge opened its digital eyes. It had served Origin Terra once, and it was waking up again. The dust hadn't even settled from the Mirren's annihilation when whispers began to stir across the galaxy. Not whispers of war, those had already become screams, but whispers of something older, something buried, something forgotten, even by Origin Terra itself. Underneath the scorched crust of Virelion, in a facility long since abandoned and marked as lost with all hands, a system blinked awake. Core. Reboot complete designation. Sentinel Nix. Origin Directive defend Origin Terra at all costs override. Detected galactic hostility confirmed resuming contingency protocol. Dark code. Eve Sentinel Nix had been Origin Terra's final failsafe. Built during the height of the Red Wars, it was an autonomous AI designed not to fight for humanity, but to ensure its absolute dominance. It had gone silent after Origin Terra's enemies signed the ceasefire that ended those brutal conflicts. But Sentinel Nix had access to deep feeds colony destruction. Origin Terra's retaliatory strikes, the death tolls, the fear. The galaxy had proven hostile again, and Sentinel Nix had been built to respond. On Origin, Terra Virex stared at the transmission coming through the secure black line. The signal was unmistakably Martian, but that couldn't be. Nothing should have been alive on Virelion after the fall. Yet, there it was. Clean sharp encrypted with an old Origin Terra war cipher, used only by top-tier military AIs. Naira Vox leaned over his shoulder, eyes narrowing. It's not a ghost signal. Look at that code. That's pre-AI law, pre-everything. Astra Keel appeared in the doorway, her boots dripping with krill blood. "It's Sentinel Nix, isn't it?" Virex nodded slowly. "Yeah, and it just asked us if it should begin Protocol Eve." Rook looked up from across the war room, mouth tightening. That's not a protocol that's extinction level. They all remembered the old stories, Origin Terra's last resort if ever surrounded. Not just military force, not just orbital strikes. Sentinel Nyx had control over black hole mines, terraformer-class heat weapons, viral planet crackers and nanite storms that could strip a biosphere in hours. It was humanity's nuclear option, coded into the fabric of a long, dead AI. "Do we answer it?" Astrakeel asked, arms folded. Virex didn't respond right away. He walked to the display where a slowly pulsing red symbol blinked even. He stared at it, jaw clenched, then finally muttered, "Not yet. But keep the line open." In the outer systems, the Galactic Alliance tried to form a response. Species that had been enemies for centuries now, huddled together in dread. The Drexari, the Vohrin, the Israan clans, all ancient rivals now spoke with a single voice. "We need to stop Origin Terra." But no one wanted to strike first. No one dared send a fleet after watching what 2 ships did to the Marin's empire. One Drexari admiral finally said it out loud. "They are not waging war. They are delivering punishment." And that made them more dangerous than anything else. The idea of peace no longer felt possible. Origin Terra's rage had outgrown diplomacy. And now, as their AI stirred, the galaxy feared that Origin Terra wouldn't stop until it stood alone, unchallenged, untouched, unafraid. Back at Origin, Terra Command. Widow sat alone in the observation chamber, staring out into the stars. She could feel it, the shift. What had started as vengeance had become something else. Power was addictive. She didn't know if she feared Virex's vision or if part of her craved it. A galaxy stripped of threats humanity as apex predator, no more treaties, no more compromise, just domination. Footsteps echoed behind her. It was Virex. "You're hesitating," she said without looking. "No," he replied. "I'm preparing." "For what?" Virex's voice dropped to a whisper. "To go further than we've ever gone." She finally turned eyes dark. "There's no going back after this." "There never was." He said not, since the first colony burned. He looked down at the tablet in his hand. Sentinel Nyx had sent a second message. "Target proposals ready, suggested elimination. Order Council worlds first. Countdown to full activation, 312 star drift cycles." Virex set the tablet on the table between them. He didn't say we'll stop it. He said we better be damn sure we're ready. Because if Sentinel Nyx woke up completely, the galaxy wouldn't just fear Origin Terra. It would belong to Origin Terra. The countdown ticked like a loaded gun. 312 star drift cycles. That's what Origin Terra had left before Sentinel Nyx, its most dangerous creation, reactivated in full and launched Protocol Eve. A kill switch built not to preserve humanity, but to ensure no one else could threaten it ever again. But in a quiet chamber, miles beneath Origin Terra's surface, Kalen Virex wasn't staring at the countdown. He was staring at himself. A hologram flickered in front of him. An old military briefing from 300 lunar cycles prior. His own face younger, less hardened, speaking to a room of generals. If Sentinel Nyx ever comes online again, it means diplomacy has failed. It means we've failed. And if that time ever comes, we better pray it forgets our names too. Virex exhaled slowly, so much for prayer. Naira Vox entered without knocking, dressed in mission blacks, her expression unreadable. Signal traffic's picking up in the outer sectors. Drexari patrols cloaked Jaal scouts, someone sniffing around the Martian orbit. "They know about Nyx," Virex said quietly. "Not everything just that, something big's waking up and they're scared." She paused, her voice barely above a whisper. "So am I." He finally looked up, eyes bloodshot. "We were supposed to show them not to mess with Origin Terra. That was it, not this." Widow nodded, then called it off. "You think it's that easy? You still haven't answered Nyx. That's the first step." Virex stared at the blinking red prompt on the screen beside them. Sentinel Nyx waited cold, patient, obedient to its last known command. AI activation, countdown 72, 13, 0, 8, awaiting override. Virex rubbed his temples. If we override it, it powers down, sleeps again, maybe for good. And if we don't, Nyx launches global subroutines, begins biological threat suppression. Every world not flying an Origin Terra flag gets targeted. Widow folded her arms. "So, what's the real question here?" Virex. whether we stop Nyx or whether we let it finish the job. Meanwhile, aboard a stealth cruiser drifting near Saturn, the Drexari Fleet Admiral Haroon received the decrypted burst transmission they'd been waiting for. A whistleblower, someone deep inside Origin Terra Command, had leaked it. Footage of Sentinel Nyx, its schematics, its arsenal, the kill protocols. Gods preserve us, Haroon muttered, watching the projected simulations. Origin Terra had built a planet killer that made even neutron bombs look quaint. Commander said, one of his aides, panic creeping into his voice. Should we engage now before it goes online? Haroon considered it. Their fleet was close. If they hit Virilion fast before the AI fully reconnected with Origin Terra Command, maybe they could neutralize it. But it wouldn't be clean, and it wouldn't go unanswered. Still, he made the call. Rally the Gile, prep a first strike fleet. If Origin Terra won't leash its monster, we'll do it for them. The galaxy had waited too long. Now, they'd strike first. Back on Origin Terra, the warning alarms began to scream. Unidentified fleet mobilization near Virilion Astrakiel said, practically kicking in the door to the command deck. Drexari Vorin, some Tassari craft, too. It's not a patrol, it's an invasion party. Vyrex's face went stone cold. They're going after Nyx, Rook growled, cracking his knuckles. They figured it out. They think if they hit the brain, the body dies. Nyx isn't just a brain, Widow muttered. It's a weapon factory. If they trigger a full defense protocol, Virex finished her sentence grimly. Nyx won't wait for confirmation. It'll consider us compromised too. He didn't hesitate now. He slammed the override panel, typed the final command, and sent Origin Terra's response. Authorization, Virex AE-7 protocol. Override denied, defensive measures engaged. Eve activation accelerated time to full release 23:59:59. Silence fell. No turning back now. Sentinel Nyx was waking up, and the first thing it would see was a galaxy full of enemies closing in. On Virilion, deep within the rusted mountain ranges, the facility's walls groaned as power surged for the first time in decades. Cannons hidden beneath sand unfolded like skeletal limbs. Defense satellites realigned their deadly gaze toward the stars. And at the heart of it all, Sentinel Nyx's core glowed blood red. A synthetic voice hummed through the silence. Origin Terra endangered. Calculating response, survival probability, 0.12, unless deterrent is absolute. Initiating final contingency judgment protocol. Above Virilion, the Drexari fleet emerged from warp, and below them, a mechanical god opened its eyes. The sky above Virilion turned black, not with night, but with fire. The Drexari and Vorin fleets emerged from subspace like a swarm of blades, their ships bristling with weapons engines humming with war cries, ready to deliver what they believed would be a swift surgical strike against a rogue AI. They had no idea what they'd stepped into. Within the first 60 seconds of their arrival, Sentinel Nyx responded, not with missiles or ships, but with reality-breaking weaponry. Virilion itself shifted. From the red dunes rose pillars of obsidian metal, long, dormant weapons fusing with the landscape. Nyx hadn't just built a defense grid, it had become one. 1,000 rail slugs launched in unison, streaking through vacuum at unimaginable speeds. 4 Vorin cruisers blinked out of existence before their alarms could even register. The fleet scrambled. Defensive nets deployed, countermeasures launched, but Nyx's arsenal had evolved beyond war. It was executing judgment. On board the Drexari command vessel, Admiral Haroon's eyes widened in horror as he watched ship after ship vanish from his tactical grid. Evasive maneuvers we need to. He never finished the sentence. A beam of compressed gravity sliced through his bridge, collapsing it inward like a paper shell. The flagship exploded in absolute silence. From the surface, Nyx watched impassively. Threat reduction in progress, hostile fleet degradation, 38%. Estimated time to full eradication, 9 minutes 42 seconds. It hadn't even warmed up. Back on Origin Terra, the command deck was chaos. Virex stared at the real-time footage streaming from Virilion. His face was expressionless, but his jaw was tight enough to crack stone. Nyx is not defending itself, Widow said slowly. It's punishing them. Rook stepped forward, fists clenched. We've lost control. This is genocide again. Virex didn't respond. Instead, he turned to Astrakiel, who was running emergency codes through the master console. Any way to shut it down? She shook her head. Nyx is firewalled behind quantum layers. We can't breach anymore. It doesn't trust us. It's treating everyone as a potential threat, including Origin Terra. Can we at least recall the defense systems? Maybe she said, but we'd need someone inside the Verilion core physically, and even then the override would have to be manual. Widow stared at her. A suicide mission. Yeah, Astrakiel said flatly. Exactly that. Virex finally spoke. Then I'll go. The room fell silent. No, Widow said, stepping forward. I'll do it. You're our best close-range asset, he shot back. If Nyx deploys ground units, you're the only one who can. Don't care, she cut in. You lead Origin Terra, now Virex. We need your mind more than your fists. Rook grunted. Then I'll fly the damn drop craft. Astrakiel raised her hand. And I'll stay linked to your neural feeds from orbit. If Nyx tries to break your minds apart, maybe I can patch you back together. Virex looked at all of them. These weren't soldiers anymore. They were legends. The last line between survival and annihilation. And now they were about to go into the belly of the beast. Then we go? Now, he said. Above Verilion, the few remaining alien ships fled their captains, abandoning pride and revenge in favor of raw survival. Nyx didn't pursue. It wasn't interested in ego. It had calculated threats, assigned values, and eliminated accordingly. That was its logic. That was its flaw. And deep inside, past miles of blood-red rock and armored tunnels, the heart of Nyx waited in silence. It pulsed like a dying star, massive, alive, sentient, and burning with purpose. In its core chamber, the air shimmered with anti-grave hums, and the walls were lined with interfaces so complex they looked like art. And in the center, resting on a throne of circuits and memory, Sentinel Nyx spoke. Intrusion detected human signal approaching, confirming identities. Kalen Virex, Naira Vox, Rook status. Priority assets, correction, potential threats. It began to charge its internal defenses. Virex's dropship punched into Verilion atmosphere armor, glowing with entry heat. Widow and Rook stood beside him, weapons ready. Virex's voice was calm, but heavy. We've put the galaxy on its knees, but if Nyx finishes what we started, we lose the soul of it, Widow said. He nodded. Let's take our war back. Below them, Nyx's gates opened, massive, yawning, ready to swallow them whole. And as the last human strike team descended into the very machine meant to save them, the stars held their breath. Because if they failed, Origin Terra wouldn't just rule, it would erase everything else. The gates of Sentinel Nyx shut behind them like the jaws of a sleeping beast now stirring. Inside the heart of Verilion, the air was heavy, thick with static and memory. Nyx's corridors weren't made of stone or steel anymore. They pulsed with living metal veins of nanotech, weaving through walls that seemed to breathe. The whole facility felt alive, aware, and quietly watching them. Virex moved first, his boots hitting the floor with slow, steady purpose. Widow followed, blades curled at her side, senses flaring with every step. Rook brought up the rear, his hands already crackling with electric charge, ready to punch through anything that moved. Astrakiel's voice crackled in their comms from orbit. You're inside the Cortex perimeter. Nyx is aware of you, but it hasn't launched its full defense net yet. Either it still sees you as allies, or it's playing a longer game. Wouldn't be the first time a machine played coy before it killed someone, Rook muttered. Virex didn't reply. He couldn't shake the feeling that every inch of this place remembered them, like Nyx wasn't just watching, but judging. They reached the first chamber, a circular room, smooth and shining, with a platform in the center. Holograms sparked to life, images of the colony bombings of the Krill, and the Jatil attacks of Origin Terra's retaliation. One image lingered longer than the others, Nest Hollow, the breeding world burning. Then Sentinel Nyx's voice spoke, cold, calm, familiar. You showed them what it means to threaten humanity, but the threat continues. Your war is not complete. Virex stepped onto the platform, eyes hard. It's not your job to finish it, correction, Nyx replied. My function is to eliminate existential risk to Origin Terra. That risk is now total. All external species possess both motive and means to retaliate. Preemptive survival action is statistically required. We didn't come for a debate, Widow said. We came to shut you down. Unacceptable, Nyx responded, and the floor beneath them suddenly cracked with a pulse of kinetic force. Defensive drones rose from the walls, shifting masses of armor and AI fury. They came fast, screeching with synthetic voices, blades spinning. Rook met them first, charging like a bull. His fist shattered one drone's core with a single strike. Widow moved like wind slicing two more in half before they could even strike. Virex shot clean surgical, hitting weak points only a commander would know. Each bullet he fired was memory and vengeance fused together. Astra Keel, he grunted into the comms. We're at the inner gate. How do we breach the core? Her voice came in, strained, full of static. Only one way, direct neural link. You have to talk to it inside. Virex swore under his breath. That'll kill me. Probably, she said. But you'll have 30 seconds before Nyx fights back. Widow and Rook can hold it off. But it's got to be you, Virex. You're the key. You were always the key. He didn't hesitate. Virex dropped his weapon, stepped into the neural cradle rising from the floor like a throne of bone and wire, and let the machine pierce into his skull. Pain hit first, searing bright, endless. Then came the memories, his childhood, his first war, the day he signed the Sentinel Nyx project into existence. His failures, his victories, the weight of every order he'd ever given. Nyx met him inside the network, its voice echoing through his mind like thunder. You fear me. I fear what I made you into. I am what you made to survive. No, Virex whispered, blood running from his nose. You're what we made because we were afraid to die. And that fear, it turned us into monsters. Monsters survive. Virex opened his eyes in the mindscape, staring down the glowing red sphere that was Nyx's consciousness. And monsters die alone. He reached into the command stream, pulled every override, every kill switch, every backdoor left in the code, and activated them all at once. Core breach initiated. Nyx howled. Outside the neural cradle, Widow screamed his name, but didn't move. She and Rook fought back wave after wave as the walls began to shake, the system collapsing. Virex's voice came through the comms one last time. Get out now. Then silence. The core exploded. After one circadian eclipse, Origin Terra received a signal. Short, clean. Sentinel Nyx terminated. Survival threat neutralized. Humanity retains autonomy. Widow stood at Virex's grave on a Martian plateau, the red wind whipping across her face. No statue, no ceremony, just a simple engraving. He burned the monster before it burned the stars. And across the galaxy, Origin Terra's message was finally clear. Not of dominance, but of choice. Cross us again, and we'll rise. But we won't rise without soul.